And everyone, please put your hands together for the fantastic Gill.
Thanks so much, Sarah. So I'm a geologist by background, although it's been a long time since I have picked up a rock as part of my research. I very much push myself to the interface between the earth and the social sciences, both in my research here at Cardiff, but also really in the work that I'm taking forward through the charity Geology for Global Development. And what I want to talk about today is really the sort of collaboration or what we've been learning around effective collaborations in policy engagement, particularly at that intergovernmental level, and share a few reflections, maybe provocations associated with that. So just to get started, for those of you who don't know, Geology for Global Development is a registered charity here in the UK. Our focus is really on working in global south contexts, using our resources, expertise, networks to build a sustainable future for all. So in terms of the sustainable development goals, by improving, transforming understanding of access to capacity to use geoscience to deliver this suite of goals, and all that comes after it post 2013. We are an affiliated organisation of the International Union of Geological Sciences, an observer organisation to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and have special consultative status with the UN Economic and Social Council. So we're UK-based, but very much working internationally, and our team now has members from Kenya, Nigeria, Cameroon, the UK, Canada. We've got a wide-ranging team. Briefly, before we come to collaboration, I want to share some reflections on how we think about change and the types of change that we want to see in terms of delivering the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is a very simplistic diagram that shows how change happens. In reality, it's not linear, it's much more complex with feedback loops, pathways, multiple levels of information. But essentially, as an organization, we're taking forward our activities to produce outputs, research outputs. So most of our work is around research that's then fed into policy and training, particularly in terms of capacity strengthening type resources. So our activities lead into outputs that then deliver some kind of capacity change, either in terms of knowledge, skills, attitudes, networks, opportunities, hopefully leading to behavior changes and then delivering impacts on the ground aligned with those sustainable development goals. And as we think about creating impact as an organization, one of the key things that we're aware of is that we can't control everything. What we do sits in this complex, dynamic ecosystem of other actors, other initiatives, other efforts, other things of work. So we have our sphere of control, we have those things that we can do, but we also have this sphere of influence and sphere of interest. And really, one of the most effective ways that we've found of trying to extend our sphere of influence to give our work the best possible opportunity to create impact is to engage at that science policy interface. So I like this figure that sort of summarizes this science policy interface and a little bit of what's needed. I think within this, we already see a range of different collaborations, so those between the science community and the policy community, but also those between different players in this science for action space and how we come together to ensure that our research, our understanding of those policy needs is as rich as possible and as useful as possible. But by engaging in this space, it helps to ensure that our work is relevant to policy priorities, but also to ensure that there is this good, effective flow of knowledge between the geoscience community and decision makers. So some of the things that we've done in this space, in the intergovernmental space, we engage in things such as the UN Forum on Science, Technology and Innovation for the Sustainable Development Goals. We've engaged in things like the UN Water Summit. We regularly submit statements to the UN High-Level Political Forum, where progress on the Sustainable Development Goals is assessed and discussed by ministerial level actors. We've also engaged in COP, so this is COP26 in Glasgow, where we sent a delegation to engage in that process. So we engage both in person there, but also through our contributions to written processes, consultations, and activities that are open to people to help shape that policy process. So what I want to do now is then just pivot to think about what have we learned? What are some of our reflections around building and leveraging collaborations for engaging in this space? And the first thing is really an encouragement to be generous in connecting other people to help facilitate the starting of those collaborations. Almost all of our work in this intergovernmental space started because an individual who worked for Public Health England at the time connected us with an existing group of people who understood how to work in that space and got us involved in some early activities. And so, there was no gain for that individual, for that individual's organization, but by them acting as a connector, we've been able to pick that up and take forward that stream of work and ensure that there are some geoscience voices at these large, high-level discussions around sustainable development. Similarly, by engaging in those with those existing groups, they opened up others. They were similarly generous with their connections to things like the International Science Council, so that when we were thinking about what we could do at these events, we were able to host side events, co-organised by the International Science Council, because people had been generous in connecting others to help deliver our shared goals. And that's certainly something that we've tried to then embed into our organisation. We don't always need to be the one who is there at the table doing X, Y, Z. If we think that we can bring one group together with another group for them to deliver impacts that is really aligned with our values, then we'll try and make that happen. And I think that's one of the key things that I would encourage people to think about. Secondly, investing time in understanding how processes work and ways that we can join existing collaborations. So we spent a good few years preparing and achieving our consultative status with the UN Economic and Social Council, trying to navigate that to understand how we contribute to those processes. And similarly with the observer status with the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Understanding these UN mechanisms, understanding these processes, and understanding things like the UN major groups and how they operate and how they function and how we can play a part in that has enabled us to, I guess, to engage more rapidly, to have more rapid traction in this space by becoming part of something bigger rather than trying to seek to have an independent voice on our own in these spaces where, as a relatively small organization, we would be easily lost. So really understanding these ecosystems and how we fit in has helped us to ensure that our voice is embedded into the statements that are delivered at these intergovernmental forums. I think that leads to the third thing around the nature of building effective contributions within the types of forums that we have there. So at many of these forums, we found that the best and most kind of impactful way that we can contribute is by embedding our ideas and our thoughts and our perspectives about the value of geoscience into statements that other people are making. So as much as we think that geoscience is incredibly important, actually there's a whole set of other things that are important as well. So in statements that were delivered about sustainable cities, for example, we worked to get a few sentences in there about the importance of the subsurface, alongside lots of other stuff around sustainability in cities. And actually, I think that is more important and more helpful to get those messages picked up because it's an interdisciplinary message for an interdisciplinary challenge. The same with the importance of education for sustainable development. So we delivered a statement at the UN Science and Technology Forum in 2019 where we talked a bit about the importance of Earth systems being part of that, but it was wrapped into this bigger statement around education for sustainable development. But I think it helps to get traction by bringing our ideas together with others to give a more rounded, balanced statement that was, that wasn't just about trying to advance one particular group's objectives. And then the fourth thing, I think, particularly for those listening who are in this academic space or maybe have opportunities to feed into continuing professional development courses or training, There are specific skills that I think that are needed for building effective collaborations, for monitoring the health of those partnerships, also for engaging the science policy interface. And I think we want to really work with students. We want to work with those who are going on to careers in this space to ensure that they have the skills to do that and to take these things forward effectively. So I think, we've been learning as we go, but what we're seeking to do now is to take our learning and how to engage in these spaces and bring it into open access learning resources so that students, as they're coming out of their geoscience courses, that's our natural grouping of people that we work with, are coming out with a wider range of so-called soft skills so that they can think about the types of partnership, the types of collaboration that they need to develop, how to monitor the health of those partnerships, how to strengthen them, and how to then leverage that to engage at the science policy interface. And it would be great to see others continue to do that and build that into the opportunities that they have when working with students. So there's some of the reflections that I have from our engagement at that intergovernmental level, but also happy to answer any questions that people have.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Joel. As always, absolutely fantastic. Round of applause, everybody, for the fantastic Joel Gill. Joel, you were alluding towards the end there, having some open source materials to help people develop, expand, improve their engagement, so that science policy engagement. Do they exist yet? Or when can we expect them? How can we help?
Yeah, we have an open access module on geoscience and sustainable development, which is a set of 8 classes with a core reading and then some different activities, so questions that people can reflect on their own, activities that they can do in small groups. And it's really been designed so that those who have opportunities to help create, shape, deliver learning experiences can take it and use it in whatever way is most appropriate for them. So it could be that they run it as a module, it could be that they take one of those classes and they embed it into an existing university module. It could be just that they're inspired by one of the activities that we suggest and they run that within something that they already do. So that covers a range of different things, such as working in the global south. It brings in skills around science diplomacy, science policy, stakeholder mapping, understanding things like the social, economic context of a situation and how that might affect projects that we run. So that would be one kind of resource that is already in effect. And then things that we're working on at the moment, particularly through this year as the organisation, is a resource that essentially helps people to navigate the UN system and understand where geoscience sits in that space, how people can contribute, and how people can engage in that. Often, it might be, there are ways as an individual to contribute. There are open calls for evidence to be submitted, case studies to be submitted, but it might also be through ways in which people partner with those of us who have the status within the system, or it might be around collaborating with professional societies, the Geological Society, for example, of London, who also have, ways of engaging and bringing together the voices of many people into those spaces.
And with that, Joel, I'm assuming that these kind of guidelines, etc., will also include almost the kind of outline of the etiquettes in terms of engaging with this. And speaking from a personal perspective, it is quite scary and intimidating when you're like, I want to get involved. I have no idea either how to do it or which toes there are to be stepped on as well. And actually knowing where to begin with regards to that can be quite tough.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we definitely we were thrown in the deep end. So when we went to our first science technology forum, the pace at which things moved, we were live writing our statement to be delivered up to seconds before we were called upon to deliver that, running around the room, trying to get certain, emphasis on the geoscience into that statement. But I think, from partnering with others, and again, it comes back to the generosity of other people who have been in this space for a while, who've shared their experience, who've shared their connections. I think we've developed a little bit of an understanding of how to structure those statements that are submitted, how to write those, ways in which I think although certain events anybody can request to speak, ways in which to increase the likelihood that you are given, some opportunity to speak, and that can often be by, stepping back and saying, well, I won't be the person to speak, but I will work to get my ideas and my core arguments into the statement that another group is delivering. And again, kind of recognizing that, within collaboration, sometimes there's a need for us to step back and let other people really take the lead, but to support them from the side, I guess.
And I guess with that as well, just being acutely aware that there's often many kind of layers of things that are going on within that room or within that forum that when you first walk into it, you might not see because it's not just somebody standing up giving a presentation or conducting a panel session. There's all kinds of stuff that's going on behind the scenes.
Absolutely, and all kinds of stuff that's gone on in the months and months
Yeah.
before. So a lot of what's going to make it into the kind of the published report, I guess, that comes out of the Science, Technology and Innovation Forum has probably already been decided upon and agreed in the months and months of preceding, whether it's regional platforms that happen in Europe and Sub-Saharan Africa and South America, or whether it's by other kind of more focused conferences and events that happen that feed into that. So I think really kind of understanding, again, it goes back to that kind of understanding of the processes, understanding of the ecosystem in which you sit, how one thing leads to another thing and leads to another thing, and finding as many different ways to submit ideas, share resources. I think one of the points I made was about kind of keeping things very simple, evidence and solution orientated. So for some of the things that we've been doing, it's not been about taking, very specific latest research about, a specific thing. It's about trying to get the value of the subsurface, something as simple as that, kind of embedded into this statement so that it can be picked up and then reflected on in more detail at a later stage. But I think kind of finding ways to bring those simple evidence, solution orientated kind of comments, sentences into as many different reports as possible can then help to try and drive a bigger conversation.
Absolutely, Joel. And I guess it's similar to what maybe Chris was saying at the beginning of today's session of, actually what's the really important stuff, kind of put, the things that you've done the bulk of your research on or whatever to one side and focus in on the really important essence that needs to come through.
Yeah.
Yeah. One final question, Joel, if I may, and this is inspired by on Tuesday we had Kambada speaking to us from Namibia, and she was talking about how so often she is on the receiving end of collaborations from the Western world, as it were. Now, this is something where GFGD works a lot with people from different countries, etc. Do you have any suggestions as to how to make sure that collaboration isn't the UK doing it to somebody in Namibia and instead creating that much more equal partnership or putting Namibia at the leadership position of the partnership?
Yeah, I mean, I think often the resources for these partnerships are sat in, for example, in the UK, we've got the UK Research Innovation, for research funding. But I think kind of there's still, even the resources sit here, there is still understanding of what may be a priority in that country will sit in, whatever's coming out of, say, for example, Namibia in terms of, what are the reports? What's the strategic development plan of the government? What's the kind of the commentary that's coming out of that space to ensure that, research is really addressing priorities or projects are addressing priorities in that space. And then really, I think building those initial collaborations as early as possible. So trying to ensure that that co-design process is really genuinely co-designed with partners in, you're not going with a pre-prepared plan of we want to do X, Y, Z. Does this sound okay to you? But coming and thinking, what could we do collectively, maybe leveraging resources from the UK or elsewhere to deliver on something that has been identified as being a priority in this country in this particular context. And I think that can be challenging. I think it can be challenging because of our funding structures here in the UK, where we might not find out until for fairly late in the day what a particular priority is going to be, tight deadlines and such like. But I really think the earlier those conversations can happen, the better. And maybe there's a space for groups like UNESCO to help facilitate those kinds of collaborations, ongoing chats about potential future uh, partnerships or research projects, and to be ready for when funding does come up elsewhere.
Brilliant. Thank you so, so much for that, Joel. As always, really brilliant to see you. Everyone, please put your hands together for the wonderful Joel Gill. Thank you very much.